Alright, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been coming at you with a series of video presentations for the Rankin Technical College AWD Application and Web Development 1111.NET Framework with Web Databases class. The main textbook for the class is ASP.NET MVC with Entity Framework and CSS by Mr. Lee Naylor. I am first going over selected chapters from Professional ASP.NET MVC 5 by John Galloway of Microsoft. My reason for that is I believe that it'll help in our overall understanding. I'm into Chapter 7, Membership, Authorization, and Security. And we are up to the using authorized attribute to require role membership. So far as it says, we've looked at the use of the authorized attribute to prevent anonymous access to controller actions. However, you can also limit the use of specific users or roles. A common example here is in admin functions. Your music store has grown to the point where you're no longer happy with editing the album catalog by directly editing the database. So it's time for a store manager controller. However, this store manager controller can't just allow any random registered user. That's kind of what Wikipedia is. You know, you can register and then you can add comment, to Wikipedia. We don't want that here. We need the ability to limit access to specific roles or users. Fortunately, authorized attribute allows you to specify both roles and users. Alright, so there's a role of administrator. This restricts access to the store manager controller to users who belong to the administrator role. Anonymous users or registered users who are not members of the administrator role are prevented from accessing it. Alright, so you can, as it says, the roles parameter, you can take on more than one role. You can also authorize a list of users. Typically it wouldn't be first names like that, but I think you get the idea, or you can combine them. It says they're managing your permission based on roles instead of users is considered a good idea for the 3 reasons shown. Users come and go, but let's face it, roles stay. Managing role membership is generally easier than managing user membership. Role-based management enables you to have different access lists across development environments. For a full example of the interaction between these, it says download the music store application from there and observe the transition between the store controller, the checkout controller, and the store manager controller. The problem with going out to Codeplex like that and doing what the author says right there is the fact that that particular project was written for ASP.NET MVC 3 and has not been upgraded. So you may have a problem with that unless you're using version 3. Alright. On the surface, the way you'll interact with the identity and security mechanisms in MVC 5 is similar to what we did in previous versions. One of the design requirements for ASP.NET identity is to allow for extensive customization without undue pain. Some of the extensibility points include adding additional user profile information is pretty much now trivial, and they'll talk about how to do that in a minute. Persistence control is supported through the use of user store and role store abstractions, and the role manager makes it fairly seamless to create roles and manage role membership. Here's the identity documentation, http://asp.net/identity, which gives much more detail. Alright. As it says, it's a very common requirement to store additional information about users. Twitter handles, maybe Facebook handle, etc. LinkedIn profiles, information. In the past, adding this was difficult in ASP.NET Identity. Users are modeled using an entity framework code first model, so adding this is as simple as adding properties to the application user class. Again, if you want more, another link. Persistence control by default, as it says here, ASP.NET Identity implements data storage using entity framework code first, so you can customize the data storage in any way you like. Additionally, ASP.NET's identities data storage is built on top of the user store and role store abstractions. Again, another link if you want more. Managing users and roles. The identity includes a user manager and a role manager. And again, another link to explain it. Again, these are very advanced topics that somebody who is just starting on this stuff probably would have little reason to use. I'm not saying no reason. You never know. But if you go to work as an ASP.NET programmer, the chances are, if you have no prior experience other than school experience, this won't be the first thing you do there. Could be, but probably won't be. And if it is, probably won't be doing it yourself, all by yourself. Historically, the huge majority of web apps have handled authorization based on locally maintained account database. The traditional ASP.NET membership system is a familiar example. New users register for an account by providing a name, a password, etc. The app adds the user information to a local database and uses it to validate login attempts. This comes with a couple serious downsides, as mentioned here. Maintaining a local database is a large liability, security liability, and responsibility, and it can be annoying to have to do this. All right. OAuth and OpenID are open standards for authentication. They allow users to log into a site using existing accounts such as Google, Twitter, Microsoft, etc. Setting up a site to support those has been difficult in the past for two reasons. The protocols themselves are complex, and many providers implement them in different ways. MVC's project templates greatly simplify this by including built-in support for OAuth and OpenID in the ASP.NET MVC with the individual user accounts and authentication template. The new login page now shows two options: use a local account to log in and use another service to log in. So your site can support both options, allowing users to continue to create local accounts if they prefer to do so. Registering external login providers, bottom of page 176 and going on. You need to explicitly enable external sites for login. Fortunately, this task is simple to do. Authorization providers are configured in the app startup.auth.cs. When you create the application, all authentication providers and there are commented out will appear as follows. Let's look. So you can see what's set up and it's commented, but it says here uncomment this to allow, for example, third-party logins, Facebook authentication, etc. So it's a matter of uncommenting what you want to allow. As mentioned, I don't consider myself at all expert on this. And I'm giving you this maybe from the 30,000 foot view, so you're getting a lot of generalities. Configuring an OpenID provider is fairly simple because no registration is required. and there's no parameters to fill in. So they show you an example halfway down on page 178 to implement a Google provider's support. The big line is the one right here. It says you add that, you're done. To test it, run the application, click the login link, and you'll see a button for Google authentication down here. Click the button, boom. After clicking accept, as it says, so the accept that was right here, after clicking that, you're redirected back to the ASP.NET MVC site to complete your registration, as is shown on page 180. After putting that in and registering, you're redirected to the home page as an authenticated user. At the time of this writing, so this was 2015, the new ASP.NET Identity System doesn't provide more in-depth account management for you. I don't know if that's changed or not since then. Configuring OAuth providers. Although the code involved in configuring an OAuth provider is similar to that of an OpenID case, the process of registering your site varies by provider. The MVC5 project template includes support for OAuth providers like Microsoft, Facebook, and Twitter, and generic OAuth. The author says, I recommend that you go in and look at the official documentation and not look at printed materials and blog posts. I'm not going to agree or disagree with that. The only thing I will tell you is if you're going to use the official documentation, you want the most up-to-date documentation as possible. That's the reason, in my humble opinion, why a lot of people turn to printed material rather than blog posts, because the stuff that's, that's the external documentation is oftentimes dated. All right. Although OAuth and OpenID simplify the site's security, they introduce other potential attack vectors into an application. If either a provider site or the security communication between sites is compromised, an attacker could subvert the login to the site and capture a user's information. Now, what the author will go into on the next several pages, maybe not so much here, but starting at the bottom of this page and then going on for several pages, are many different types of security breaches that can happen. All right. Supporting only providers whose security you trust is important for two reasons. When you're redirecting your users to external sites, you want to make sure those sites are not malicious. You never want to tell somebody on your site to click a URL and have that URL be bad. Secondly, authentication providers are giving you information about users, not just their registration state, but also email addresses, etc. A provider could potentially, either accidentally or maliciously, all right, work with that information when they should not do so. Requiring SSL, again, notice require HTTPS, which would mean that it's an HTTPS rather than an HTTP login. It says enforcing this during login causes all calls to external providers to occur over HTTPS. Additionally, using this with Google authentication is important. Google reports a user who logs in once via HTTP and later via HTTPS are two different people. Always requiring HTTPS will avoid that problem. So, again, so far the chapter has basically focused on using security features that are built into or available from ASP.NET MVC to control access to a site. Many developers see this, as it says, as the extent of their involvement to web application security. However, as mentioned there, the chapter began with different warnings about how applications need security features that do nothing but prevent misuse. So as the author says here, let's shift focus to see how hackers may try to misuse applications. Now, let's see, starting on 183 and going on to the next several pages, they're going to give you examples of different threats that you could potentially have onto your system. I see it starts on 183, and I'm looking, I know it's a lot of the rest of the chapter. It literally looks like it goes to about page 207. I think this is a good time to stop, and I'll try to take most of that information and put it into the next lecture.